Hello, everyone. Good evening. Welcome. I'm Karen Tucker, CEO at the Churchill Club, and this program is called Socially Conscious Careers, Innovating for Good. We have with us 5 distinguished individuals to address this topic, starting with Josh Becker, Sid Espinosa, Randy Haykin, Nancy Heinen, and of course our moderator, Jen Ratay. Welcome and thank you all very much for joining us this evening. We appreciate it. The story of how this program came about is a perfect example of how Churchill Club is so privileged to partner with so many quality organizations in our community. As you might know, we are a 501c3 not-for-profit business and technology forum. We present up to 40 programs each year in the interest of our mission, which is to encourage innovation, economic growth, and societal benefit. Well, Randy Haykin of the Gratitude Network and Michelle Sitton came to us with several ideas for collaborating on programs around social innovation, which of course is a central theme for us. So we iterated on the ideas with Randy and Michelle. We came up with a direction, and then we sought feedback from others in the community. And among those from whom we sought feedback were Sid Espinosa and Emily Horn here at Microsoft. Not only were they gracious enough to provide feedback, but they also offered to host the program. So each of us in this room knows very well that it takes a village to make a difference and to do things together, and a lot of people actually did contribute to this program. So thank you very, very much. Our co-host is the Gratitude Network. Our sponsor is Microsoft. Thank you. We have an amazing set of programs coming up, and I hope you will be able to experience them. The evening of Wednesday, May 13, we present Is It Still TV If There's No Television? This is about trends and their implications around content and audience engagement, a rapidly unfolding area, and a lot of new insights to be gained there. The morning of Friday, May 15, it's the Woman Tech Exec Roundtable, a program that we present to empower and inspire women within the innovation community. And the evening of Thursday, May 21st, it is the 17th annual Top 10 Tech Trends debate with an all-star group of 5 venture capitalists who are going to compete for the audience vote by presenting trends that they believe will see explosive growth in about 5 years that are not obvious today. And then finally, the evening of Tuesday, June 2, it's about wearables and how design, engineering, and business model innovation can come together and really look at how wearables could be pushed past the tipping point. We have an amazing group of speakers with world-famous designer Yves Bahar of Jawbone, engineering maestro Mike Bell of Intel, formerly at Apple, and serial CEO and entrepreneur Sunny Vu at Misfit. So I hope that you can come to one or all of the programs. We would welcome you to do so. And one final announcement, if you're tweeting, please use the hashtag Churchill Club, and you'll find other Twitter codes in your programs. So let's turn this over to Jen now to kick off the conversation, and thank you very much, Jen. Welcome.
My pleasure. Great. Thank you, Karen. Good evening, everybody. Welcome. I'm Jen Ratay. I have the honor of serving as Executive Director of the Silicon Valley Social Venture Fund, commonly known as SV2. SV2 is based here in Silicon Valley. We're a community hub of more than 200 concerned citizens who come together to learn about effective giving and to make a positive impact in our community, both here in our Bay Area backyard as well as around the world. Our vision is for a Silicon Valley where everyone makes social responsibility a priority in their lives. Tonight, we've come together to have a conversation on how individuals, and potentially including some of you, can create meaningful, rewarding lives that integrate social benefit. Consider for a moment, is where you spend your time and talents, and I know we have tremendous talent in the room because I've seen the registration list, is it aligned with your core personal values, or really what matters most to you at the end of the day? Let's challenge ourselves to think creatively and broadly about the possibilities. And we have a terrific panel here tonight to help us do that. Josh, Sid, Randy, and Nancy, all individuals who have intentionally designed their life journey for a blend of both success and significance. They've all traveled different trails through government, the for-profit sector, academia, philanthropy, nonprofits, but they share a common thread, and that's of placing social benefit work squarely in their day-to-day work, and I know in the evenings as well. You have their bios in the program, so I'm not going to go over those in detail, and you'll hear from them in just a moment. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. But first, let me share two big picture trends as context. First, top talent, and this is across all age groups, is focusing to drive social impact. The leading MBA programs these days have courses on social entrepreneurship, nonprofit management, philanthropy, impact investing. This was not the case a decade ago. Millennials, who are at the early stage of their career, are choosing jobs more and more that align with their values, and they want to do work and see their role as really contributing to humanity in some way, and sometimes are willing to trade off some salary for that. And then decades into one's career, mid to late stage career professionals, we're seeing hundreds of thousands of individuals across America in their 50s to 70s and older who are choosing so-called encore careers, socially benefit second acts, if you will, and sometimes third acts and fourth acts. Second, nonprofits and government no longer have a monopoly on socially beneficial careers. Today, mission-oriented businesses are now undeniable players in the social purpose game. We're seeing more and more the traditional mindset of profit versus purpose is outdated. It's really a false dichotomy. The either-or is over. The rise of socially conscious business is taking many forms, and I'm excited. I know we're going to hear some different examples on the panel, but everything from company founders committing pre-IPO stock to the proliferation of B Corps. And if you're unfamiliar with that term, B Corps are companies that pledge to adhere to social and environmental accountability guidelines. There are more than 1,000 in 33 different countries and 60 different industries, and you may have read in the news Etsy, an online retailer, a B Corp, went public just this month. And then more mature companies in their life cycle are often modeling corporate responsibility. I know Microsoft is a real leader in this area. And it includes things like employee giving matching programs and supporting employees to offer skilled volunteer hours in the community and even globally. So what nearly all of us here in the room have in common, perhaps all of us, is that Silicon Valley is our home. It's the place where we live, where we work, where many of us are raising families. And so what's happening here in our own backyard? In short, the story is mixed. First, everyone knows that this is a region teeming with ingenuity, innovation, optimism, growth, wealth, Teslas. We are at a moment in time where our region is really back on top economically, ranking among the leading economies in the world. Silicon Valley is home to the most millionaires and billionaires per capita than anywhere else on the planet. And annually, we have an increasing portion of the top 50 philanthropists is reported each year by the Chronicle of Philanthropy, coming from our region and coming out of the tech sector in particular. Silicon Valley is not just disrupting industry after industry, but it's disrupting philanthropy and social enterprise and impact investing as well. Now, at the same time, there's a more troubling side for all of us to consider as we think about how we deploy our resources, our talents, our time for good. Though often hidden from view, our region suffers from poverty, from hunger, and from a sharp increase in homelessness. Here in Santa Clara County, where we sit tonight, more than 60,000 children currently live under the poverty line, meaning that they have trouble meeting their day-to-day needs. 250,000 of our community members visit the local food pantries each month. And the total of number of people using food stamps has hit a 10-year high. One example of the hundreds of bright spots in our community, just in San Mateo County, just north of here, is something called the Big Lift, which brings together in a powerful way companies, individual donors, the Silicon Valley Community Foundation, the San Mateo County of Education, all coming together to work toward one shared goal in our community, and that is to increase third grade reading level proficiency from the dismal level of 57% of all children in San Mateo County are reading at third grade reading level proficiency level, and get that up to 80% together by 2020. Just one example of many bright spots that we have in our community. So tonight, ultimately, we hope that you take away from this conversation a deeper appreciation and understanding of the full spectrum of opportunities you have to deploy your resources and your talents, and that you'll be inspired to take some concrete, practical next steps once you leave here this evening. So I'm going to ask our panelists now, starting with Josh here, if they could briefly introduce yourself and then tell us what has motivated you at different stages as you've crafted a social impact-oriented life.
Well, thank you. I'm actually a little confused because I came to Microsoft today for the Coder Dojo, and then somehow I ended up here, and it's all very confusing.
I thought it was for the social lubricant.
Well, that too. But thank you. It's a great panel, and what you said really resonates with me as the father of a third grader who fortunately can read, although he chooses not to, unfortunately, too often. I think like many of you, I've sort of had a kind of lifelong interest and commitment to social, engagement, and I've pursued that through a variety of means, and interested in exploring some of those tonight through. Being a congressional press secretary and kind of working on Capitol Hill to starting an impact investing fund that was successful, returned, made people money and also did social good. To being an entrepreneur in Silicon Valley right now, running a company that's a venture-backed company, but looking for ways to leverage my time, which actually also has a social mission. Started for 3 years as a public interest project at Stanford. But also helping let other busy people leverage their time as founder and chair of Full Circle Fund, something that works closely with kind of SV2 and sort of analogous to some extent to really help people leverage, busy people leverage their time to have community impact. So I'm constantly looking and learning and and questioning kind of how to have the biggest impact. And I think that, I've done some various things that I'm happy to talk about and also look forward to the discussion tonight.
Great.
Go down the aisle.
No, let's mix it up. Let's actually go to Randy.
Oh, okay. I was going to start out by saying I'm a recovering venture capitalist and then go from there. But, so, how I started to think about the social impact space and sort of career shifting, and which I think all of us have gone through, is my wife and I got involved in a group called Opportunity International. How many people have heard of Opportunity? Okay, a couple of hands. It's very similar to Grameen Bank. Muhammad Yunus, who got a Nobel Peace Prize a number of years ago. Those two organizations are very similar. And we raised 3 young ladies in Pleasanton, and I found that the 2 of us being involved at a board level with Opportunity, which does micro-lending around the world, enabled us to expose our 3 daughters to what was going on around the world. And as they were learning, and I was watching the impact that it was having on them, I started thinking about my own career shift, I think is what happened. And so in forming the Gratitude Network, which I started about 4 years ago, the idea was to take the experience of being an angel and a venture capitalist and an entrepreneur, like many of you are here in the Silicon Valley, and see if I could apply that to social benefit globally. And so, therefore, the Gratitude Network, I guess Opportunity International plus venture capital kind of got me thinking about Gratitude Network. So that was sort of the entry point. But I think I think a lot of us can relate to that when you see how your children are changed by something. I now have 3 young ladies who are in their 20s who are all service-oriented. And I think it really helped because, to echo what Jen had said earlier, not only do we have discrepancy here in the Silicon Valley, but if you look globally, half the world is living on less than $2 a day. So there's a huge discrepancy, and I see a couple of nods in the audience of people who have been out there. And so how do you educate our own children here that life isn't all about cars and all the things we have here in the Silicon Valley, but is about more of a global perspective. So I think that's what really drew me in.
Great. How about you, Sid?
Parents really is where it all started. My family has a strong commitment to service and to thinking about impact. My mom just finished 4 years in the Peace Corps and is now, she just flew today actually back to Ghana, where she's been living, working with children who have been rescued from trafficking situations. So I think early on, for both my sister and myself, she impressed upon us, for us in particular, I don't think this is necessarily for everybody, but that happiness and fulfillment would probably come through service and through finding ways to give people a voice who don't have it, or to address issues facing a community or a social cause. And so, that led to work in government and in the White House, at the Justice Department, with the Attorney General for years, overseas at an embassy, mayor of Palo Alto. I mean, sort of that side, policy and politics, and looking to have an impact in a community. Working with lots of nonprofits in all sorts of ways, from major capital campaigns to board service, to working at companies and thinking about how the private sector can engage that way, running the Hewlett-Packard Foundation and global philanthropy there for years around the world, working here in corporate social responsibility and philanthropy, and now in civic tech as well. And what's been interesting for me, and the real learning over time, which we'll probably talk about more, is how the sectors, and I think there's really been an evolution in recent years about the impact that cross-sector work can have, and thinking about how you connect the dots to have greater impact. We're talking about, as well, how each sector is changing, but there's also an overlap and a connectivity that I think can lead to huge change on some of our social issues, and I think that's really a trend that we'll see continuing over the next few years.
Well, when I saw your bios, the term that jumped to mind were tri-sector athletes. Folks who can be in really any sector, but are sector boundary crossers. And so we're going to dive into that more. I'm glad you raised that, Sid. How about you, Nancy?
Right, well, I'm Nancy Heinen, and I am truly a recovering corporate lawyer. So if he's a recovering venture capitalist, I did have maybe a more traditional trajectory of career in some aspects, in that I started as a lawyer in a private firm. I then went in-house to corporations, and the last 12 years of my general counsel career were working for a company called Next and then for Apple. But I was always driven as part of that corporate goal with something that I think was infused in me from my early observations, that women don't have a seat at the table. And that I had a mother who raised 6 kids, would have been a doctor, I think. I had a sister who was old enough that when she had a young child, was interviewing for medical school, and was told, there's no place for you, it has to go to the men because you'll probably just have another child. She's a quadruple board certified surgeon, just so you know. Because I also was raised with a mother who, even though her career aspirations may have been frustrated, she infused in her children, and I'm the youngest of 6, a desire to see that you can do more with your life. So I think for me it was very much about being able to assert your own capabilities, make sure that you could work in the workforce successfully, and then could you build enough of a backdrop that you could bring along the people you wanted to. And as I moved into leadership positions, it was always a part of me to say, can I get in the room? I love what leanin.org is doing, and leaning into the table. I was the generation banging on the door to get in and try and see that there were enough chairs at the room so that a woman could take a seat. So it very much influenced my desire to develop talent. And could you get anyone who was more in the disenfranchised or somehow discriminated against? And it wasn't just women, it was minorities, disabled. How are you able to get them to be really heard and to be effective? And so I've really felt that leadership development was one of the most important things I could do. And I did focus a lot on women's development. But I got to Apple with Steve Jobs at a time when it was kind of at death's door in 1997. And a decade later, it was at Heaven's Gate. And it was a remarkable ride along the way. And we had a phenomenal success. But it was really time to explore those areas that were most meaningful to me. And it turned out my kids were almost teenagers. So go figure, they were growing up in the meantime. And you really wanted to have a chance to be part of their life while they were still willing to lean into you. And it wasn't dependent on what airplane you had just gotten off. So I really went intentionally broad. I'd had a lot of interest, and I was saying, how can I express my desire to be a more impactful player in my community and in the world, because I have traveled significantly, and still use something more than just the check. That's great, but it's got to be more. So I looked for a lot of models of deep engagement and found in Silicon Valley there are so many people and so many structures, and some have developed even further. We've got the founder of Full Circle Fund with Josh here, that are really finding those talent sources and looking to develop that human capability. And they're marrying them with remarkable social innovators and social entrepreneurs. And together, they're helping to build the capacity of these organizations to take it to the next level, to start scaling what they're doing. And so that kind of social change where you celebrate the success of the remarkable talent pool we have here, you marry it with these remarkable social entrepreneurs who have passion, but often can't figure their way through the financial statements, or they don't have a great governance sense. They can't figure out how to segment their customers so they can be effective in their programmatic aspects. How can you marry those two together and have a more successful outcome for everyone in the community? So that's what I've been spending my time doing, and it's been an amazing part of the journey.
Lessons learned. Sid, you started in on that, so if you would like to carry through lessons learned or surprises along the way.
Sure. Well, I think that following on the theme of cross-sector work, since that's where I finished off, I was just thinking, walking in, about an organization called Tummel, which is up in the city. Two Stanford Business School women who started this great organization. Look it up if you don't know it. They are working with startups that are working on urban issues. And they're a nonprofit. And most of these organizations, the companies that they're working with, are focused on civic issues in metros, right? So think disruptive technologies, et cetera, taking place in urban areas. But each of these companies is seeking to solve social problems. There, in one example, is sort of this new model where here is a nonprofit organization thinking about social impact by helping create a bridge for businesses and for startups in particular. I think that kind of cross-sector innovation and conversation is where we're going to see a lot of thinking over the next few years. The potential is phenomenal and fantastic, and I think that there aren't sort of the boundaries of silos that we used to see between nonprofits, between business, et cetera. And I'm excited to watch that. I think it's definitely going to be a part of the future.
Jen, you had mentioned the Big Lift, and that's one organization that SB2, where I'm board chair, funds into. And I think what you sense from the SB2 partners is we've funded over a 15-year history a lot of point solutions, that there are a lot of great organizations, but really to have systemic change, you have to start getting alignment, as Sid has mentioned, between all the different sectors that can play an important role. Government's going to play a role, corporations need to play a role, the nonprofit sector, the financial industry has to play a role. And so what I'm most excited about is seeing some of these collective action organizations all coming together, agreeing on an objective, then setting the metrics they're all going to be measured by. And that is not easy because they all tend to measure themselves and their outcomes differently. And it's a really exciting part. It's really hard. It's really hard, but there's incredible intelligence and a lot of research and a lot of pilots being run. And like Sid, I think if that cross-sector, what Jen taught me, she calls it the collaborative muscle. If we develop that collaborative muscle in Silicon Valley, that's how we'll start to get the systemic change. Like a big lift in San Mateo County, that's how we'll get these kids at third grade reading level. And by the way, they predict the number of prison beds in California based on third grade reading level. If you are not reading by third level, you're out by third grade. If you're not reading at that level by third grade, your outcomes are significantly impacted. Because until third grade, you are learning to read. From third grade on, you read to learn. And so it's such an important point. And finally, there's this recognition and an attempt to really try and solve it. And hopefully that will be a replicable solution that we can take to other industries. So it's really exciting work.
And while this alignment is going on, I think there's another thing that I've learned about what's happening in the social impact space is the entrepreneur with a capital E. So when I was in business school 25 years ago, you couldn't even get a group of 5 people together who understood what entrepreneurship was at business school. Now I teach at Berkeley and at Cambridge in the UK and at the business schools. And all of the students globally, because I have students from Japan, from Europe, from South America, from the US, and they're all thinking about entrepreneurship. So the millennials and entrepreneurship has become a little bit inextricably linked. What does that mean for social impact is, particularly the millennials seem to, well, sometimes they don't seem to care so much, but other times they do. They are very socially conscious, as you mentioned earlier, Jen. And I think that those are our future leaders. So today's millennials are going to replace all of us as tomorrow's leaders. How are they thinking? They're thinking about how they can impact the world and not just take a job for a job's sake, but take something that's meaningful, that has impact, that is a life that is rewarding to them. And even to the point of not taking any job until they find, I find with my own teenage daughters, not taking anything, they rather wait for something to come along. But you can all relate to that. But I think that entrepreneurship at the same time, you can find entrepreneurs in villages in Africa, in doing water solutions in India, thinking about education in Colombia. And it's just amazing how what we take for granted here in the Silicon Valley has completely spread globally. And I don't think it's going to go backwards. I don't think this is like, this is a bubble and it will burst and everyone will forget about entrepreneurship. The American and international heroes are women and men who are entrepreneurs right now. So that's definitely connected to this whole shift.
So shifting to Josh, I'm hoping that you can look toward the future for us in terms of what you think might be the areas ripe for innovation in the social innovation space in the next 5 years.
Well, I'll say a couple of things. First, just to kind of add on there, I agree with everything that was said. I think, when you also talked about it as well, the evolution, say, at Stanford Business School in terms of interest in entrepreneurship. I agree very much with sort of breaking down the boundaries and as well as sort of the getting, as Nancy talked about, the public sector, private sector, not-profit sector aligned. I will say I've also learned humility in the sense that, we're very proud of the work that many things have done, but, including the work that Full Circle's done, and particularly in education. But, it's, and there are kids who've gotten better education result, but there's still so much work to do. And we think of people rioting in Baltimore, and fortunately not rioting here in California, but the mass incarceration problem in Baltimore is very present here in California, extremely present. Is a major issue, and so I think so much has been done. There's so much work to do, and I think a lot of it does start at early childhood education. And a lot of longer-term work we need to do. But anyway, that's just one thing I've learned along the way. Thinking to the future, I mean, one area I'm very excited about, I'll just talk about tonight, is the environment. So I think Jerry Brown had a very exciting announcement today, which was an area where California particularly is leading the country and has to lead the country because of the divided Congress. Not much is going to get done on climate change, which we've seen as having a major impact around the globe, and particularly here in California. And I think through, even though we had sort of a clean tech investment, interest and then probably disinterest in some ways, a lot of great things came out of that. And we now do have Solar City and Tesla and O-Power and other great examples. And through the Clean Tech Open and other things, we're continuing to fund those kinds of companies. So we've seen a real alignment of, that's a real area we had nonprofit, public sector, for-profit kind of coming together. And I think California clearly, with our cap and trade system and other things, clearly we are the leader, and pushing beyond 33% renewables, for example. So I'd say that's one area, and education as well, through some of the initiatives that are going on. But real focus on, hey, if we can't make innovation happen here, and it's innovation not just in, not that everyone needs a computer or or such, but if we can't support innovative models here, which in many cases though can include technology in various ways, then where are they going to work, right? So I think those are some areas that I'm personally focused on, but I think there's a lot of opportunity.
Nancy, how about you? What do you see is ripe for innovation over the next few years?
I think impact investing and the whole concept of really marrying purpose and passion with financial return of some sort, and it's going to be the spectrum. An example, I'm on the board of an organization that is both a nonprofit and a for-profit. And they did this, it came out of Stanford's design school, the Design for Extreme Affordability program. And there is a market for the product. It's a very low-cost infant warmer for hypothermic newborns called Embrace. And so there's a market where people can buy it, and venture capitalists have funded into that. And there is a market failure in the poorest areas where we serve in Afghanistan and refugee camps and some of these very poor areas where only philanthropy will fill. And you're starting to see the financial sector filling out where the right capital is being invested. And so those models are great where there can be a profit that can then go back into the nonprofit as well as other funding. So you're seeing financial levers being pushed to really bring about this incredible change. And you're seeing that in a lot of different areas. I think one of the great events to go to when you're in the Bay Area, if you're interested in this, is SOCAP, the Social Capital Markets. That is, it's a remarkable combination of entrepreneurs, funders, intermediaries, all trying to figure out how do we fill this ecosystem and make it a more profound way of reaching this change. And so there's so much, and that's based at, it's at Fort Mason in September every year.
The October this year.
Oh, October this year, right, thank you. Yeah, and it's just, it's so energizing to see the solutions that people are coming up with and the ability to fund them and the energy and passion that's around that and the skills, the smarts. These are just incredibly competent, educated, passionate people who usually have very successful other things they're doing, and they're investing this time and energy to see how we can make this successful. So the whole impact investing space is just, I think, transformational.
Mm-hmm.
I also want to add another area which I'm guessing the audience probably has a hand in, but I just got back from a terrific conference. The first time I've gone, it's GSB and Arizona State University doing what I think is the top education and technology conference. And I was totally wowed by the number of new ideas, new companies, the way the investment community is thinking about education now. And I think it's only the tip of the iceberg, because if you think about it, those living below the poverty level, both in the U.S. and abroad, can eventually a mobile device is affordable. Whereas the gap was quite wide if you had to have a $2,000 computer. But mobile now really opens up a lot, and it means that a farmer in Africa, out in the fields, and there are thousands of farmers using their mobile phones and conducting business from their mobile phones as a minor example. So I think education, therefore, becomes a lot more affordable and can easily be in the hands of even the most impoverished countries and children. So going back to the early childhood and all the way through, the impact that it can have in K through 12 and even higher ed. I was just wowed by what the presidents of Arizona State University and several other colleges are starting to think about, how they're going to go global, how they can have social impact in what they're doing. Starbucks was, the founder of Starbucks was at this event and announced a major effort with Arizona State University where they're actually providing significant education to Starbucks employees virtually through distance learning and through local courses. So there's just so much, I think, that's going to evolve that's just on a fast track to spin.
If I can build on that, I obviously work at a tech company, so it may be surprising that I chew on a huge grain of salt anytime I hear about technology solving social problems, even though that's the space that I work in, just because the social problems are complex and difficult, and not everybody has access, and technology is expensive and changing for all those reasons. But I will let me just echo that with that caveat, there are so many bright lights and examples of transformative work being done through technology. And going back to sort of this younger generation, we run a competition called Imagine Cup around the world as part of our Youth Spark initiative in Philanthropy. And I was a judge in St. Petersburg, Russia, and contestants from all around the world were there. And these are mostly college students who have used technology to solve social problems. And your example reminded me of it because one of the winning teams, and by the way, the American teams were really good on they were out of business school, were really good at the sale and the pitch. Truly, but the innovation, I mean, the team from Romania, the team from Ethiopia, the team from Portugal, the team from Taiwan, I mean, the innovation that was happening all around the world, phenomenal. And so one of the winning ones was a team, patents pending internationally and in the US, a team of students who, recognizing the proliferation of cell phones and wanting to address stigma around hearing aids in Taiwan, had developed technology that would both increase the spectrum of sound, which isn't a goal of hearing aids, really would gain back sound that you had lost, and then increase the frequency so that you could have the same benefits of a hearing aid. And you could do that through your normal earpiece and your just standard cell phone, eliminating the need for a hearing aid and eliminating the stigma that existed in the community. And so I'm talking to them about their business plan, how they're rolling it out, and they're like, well, we're finishing our sophomore year of college. Oh my God, like, wow, that's great, right? And there were hundreds of these from all around the world. Truly groundbreaking technologies that had a social purpose. And it gives you so much hope. Just really quickly, if you're interested in sort of this generational trend, there was a report done by the MacArthur Foundation, funded by the MacArthur Foundation, actually done by Rutgers and Net Impact, just 2 years ago, that segmented out college-age students, millennials, Gen X, and boomers, and looked at sort of things that are important in their life and sort of trends in seeking jobs and social impact in particular, and where that played a role. And so, great report, kind of gives you a sense of what the trends are and sort of what's driving this younger generation to think about differences in their careers and what will drive their careers, if you're interested in that topic.
And I just want to bank off that because I'm just thinking about the audience and what might have attracted you to come tonight, and thinking that probably a number of you are older than 20, let's say older than 30 in the audience. And what I love teaching, and I love being around young people, but it's just for this reason, because if you look at the spirit of the younger generation coming up, it just is uplifting, getting up every morning and thinking, I get to go work with the Gratitude Award winners from last year, and they're all over the world, and they're all incredible. And it's just really an honor. And so I would encourage you, actually, I was just curious, show of hands, of how many of you are thinking from a career perspective you want to get more active with social impact or a particular area in a social area that brought you here tonight? Right, so I would encourage you, it's just great being around the younger millennial generation is very uplifting, and if you can work that into whatever you're thinking you might get into, move into, it all, it makes it so much more rewarding.
So I too had a question for the audience. How many of you are currently serving on nonprofit boards of directors? Okay. And are there any folks in here who would be interested in exploring that? Nonprofits certainly need high quality, thoughtful, strategic, brave board members. Okay, great. Well, so I think a through line, for all of you have served on nonprofit boards at some point. Could one or two of you talk a little bit about that experience and what you learned from it or how it might be meaningful?
I had just a quick thing on that, and then let the other folks talk here. But I've been on both very large nonprofit board, American Cancer Society, and on a one-person startup out of a garage. That's a nonprofit.
So give us a sense when you say large board.
And with the and so that's why I'm thinking the trend here is really toward either the larger groups trying to figure out how to think more entrepreneurially, otherwise they're going to perish. And if you look in the cancer space, for example, ACS, American Cancer Society, is having a really difficult time growing right now because they're not nimble. And here comes Lance Armstrong's group and all the other very innovative younger groups. And so I think that is a major difference if you look between a larger and a smaller. But I think what it showed me is that in order to survive, those larger nonprofits need to start thinking more entrepreneurially.
Well, for one, one thing I did when I was at Stanford Business School, we started the Board Fellows program.
Right.
So
That's right.
Your husband was a Board Fellow, and so, it was interesting because originally, there was sort of a 3-hour workshop on like a Wednesday when we didn't have school where talk about board leadership, but it was basically half about like your personal liability. So it was very like non-inspiring or useful. And so we said, hey, we'll set up this program and we'll see, we'll create 25 slots, probably not that many people will be interested, where we'll give an opportunity for people to serve on a board and have them make a commitment, but the board make a commitment to them as well. And for the year, and we actually had 100 people apply. We were really shocked at how many people were applied interested. So I think that, and sort of given a theme with Full Circle or SV2, I think there's a lot of people out there who want to have an impact and want to do something, but they're very busy. They're busy with their job, kids, other things. So the more institutions, organizations we can, create that leverage people's time, the smart people we have here in the audience and other folks in the Valley who've got time, a little bit of time, but have brain power, have money. It's really about leveraging that, right? So I think that's sort of the new model, right? It's not just writing a check. It's, how can we really accelerate some of these organizations and what we're doing? So that's sort of my point. But I've gained a lot from a nonprofit board service. So I think if you read Hoffman's books and which I think are the best books I think on sort of career today, Start Review and other things, sort of have like this network of weak ties, right? So it's like the large network of weak ties. So I think being on a board, you can have a lot of impact on an organization, but you also expand your network, meet people, and years later you run into them in different settings, and it's just I think it's sort of part of the experience of sort of being in the Valley. But I think it is certainly a way to have a lot of impact. I mean, a lot of it does come down to fundraising for a lot of organizations, so you have to have sort of an appetite to help. But especially the small organizations need more than that as well.
So Josh, speaking of humility, did found the Stanford Business School Board Fellows Program. I can't remember how many years ago. It might have been 2 decades ago now. I'm not trying to date you, but
not that long ago.
And it's then scaled to all the top business schools. And when I had the pleasure of working at Stanford Business School, we placed 100 board fellows out of a class of 300 students on over 60 local nonprofit boards. So it was an idea. There are a number of ideas that have scaled, but this one I think has been a really powerful high leverage opportunity for talent to get those experiences early in their career. So anyone else want to make a comment on board service?
Yeah, I think there's one thing, an observation I've had is so many extremely experienced for-profit people have trouble accessing the decoder ring for the nonprofit world. Mm-hmm. And sometimes there's a reluctance to actually do it. They want to do no harm, which is helpful, but they don't really see how their skills are applicable. And I think it's one reason SV2 exists in a full circle fund. How do you give people experiences that give them that confidence to understand how the application of these skills and experience can play in a nonprofit while still honoring what the nonprofit's mission and the fact they're driven by different metrics and different outcomes than a for-profit. So finding those opportunities to really kind of decode the process is a really important part. And there's great organizations around to help with that process. And really it's about having the experience and encouraging people to just try it. I mean, you do bring an important word that Jen and Joshua is humility. You're not going to be the expert on what their program is, in other words, what their solution is to solve it, but you bring in great opportunities for them to learn from you, and really finding that expression and that active listening of what they're saying and how you might translate that is just, you just have to do it. I mean, it really is one of those where just do it, or find other organizations that can give you that experience to help you along, guiding that journey along. But too many people are afraid to make that step, and I think we miss out on some great opportunities for scaling some great innovations.
And I would just add, I think, and we have I can reflect on the fact that we have a board placement program here that we do in partnership with the Community Foundation. There are orgs out there, depending on the type of, for those who haven't yet been on a board, depending on the type of organization you'd like to join that can help with that placement and connecting those dots. But one of the things I think that's really important to think about and be true to as you go through that process is the self-discovery about what you're truly passionate about, right? Because there are different motivators why people join boards, and here I've just seen again and again, as we talk to execs about it, they'll say, well, what's most important to the company? How could I help the company? Like, what are our top nonprofit goals? I can guarantee you will not want to go to those meetings in 4 months, right? We work so hard to figure out what do they really care about. Well, always, like education. Why? Like, what have you done in education? Like, my kids are in school. Pretty much the only thing I do, like, outside of here is my kids in school. And so you dig at special ed, adult ed, are you interested in girls in science? And they're like, oh my gosh, I just thought education. And so you dig deeper. What do you do on the weekends? You know, I kayak in the bay. What do you think about that? The bay needs to be cleaned up. This is crazy, right? And you see the passion start to come out, and you're like, there's a great organization called Save the Bay. Let's talk to them about, because you see that. And so I think you might automatically think that education's where you want to save the world, but really doing that deep dive, because it's hard work, and these organizations really need the skills that you can bring, and hopefully with most orgs, fundraising is an important component, so that as well, and sort of opening them up to a new network of people. And you have to be committed to that. You have to, it's work. And so, it's important to think about, what issues you're going to have a deep enough passion around that you're going to have that sustained commitment.
Can I just comment on the fundraising side, because I think that dissuades a lot of people from even making this step. They're just like, oh my God, it's just going to be about asking all my friends for money. And it's really not. It's about telling your friends why you joined an organization. And Sid has said it, so beautifully. If it's something you're passionate about, if you've done that work and you have found something that's really working, you just tell your friends, wow, here's why this is important to me. They may or may not find it important to them, because everyone has to be on that journey of finding their own alignment between the passion and where they want to invest. But it's sort of demystifying if I can't get people to write this big check, then I don't want to do it. That I think is a real hindrance to increasing the ability of nonprofits to access the networks. Let them tell the story, but just say, okay, I'm willing to have 5 of my friends hear about it, hear why I joined this board. And it's something that we need to demystify more. Yeah, there are always great organizations, and there are people who can always get funds to write great checks, and a lot of public charities rely on that. But that's not really the heart of board service. It's really sharing what the passion is, why this program is important, what impact it's going to have, and why you believe in it, and the leadership, and then letting that relationship blossom. Because I bet every one of us has written, whatever bike ride one of our friends did for whatever charity or whatever walk. We've all written a lot of those checks, but it's not an ongoing relationship with the organization. And you're trying to create that opportunity where they can go deeper and learn more and then decide if that's where they want to do it. But it's important. The fundraising is not unimportant, but how you do it is really a much broader panoply of things you can bring to it than just asking your friends to write a check.
And Nancy, before you had mentioned, just do it, in the spirit of getting out there and trying things. So to get really practical now, I'm hoping that each of you could share 2 to 3 concrete recommendations for the audience, for folks who are interested in getting started on a socially conscious career path, or maybe doubling down on a socially conscious career path that someone's already on a journey.
I'll take a crack at it first. Actually, I put a little list together. Here's what I think is a great way of or at least what I did when I was making a shift, is I put a list of the best books I could find together on this area of kind of shifting into social impact, whether it was education or whatever. And we'll probably talk about this after on the panel, but I would recommend that you find, the way you can find your passion is by diving into some of these books, some of the websites, some of the blogs that you can follow, and kind of see what other people are doing until, just like Sid said before, eventually the light goes on and you go, that's really interesting, and that's me. That fits with my skills, with my interests, with my strengths. And I think it's that intersection of those two things that you get that aha moment. And by the way, if you want this list, I can email it to you. Just give me your card after the session. Then the other thing is mentorship. When you were talking about demystifying the whole idea of working for a social for-profit or a nonprofit, either one, that it's not all about fundraising, but that is something important you can help with. But I think if you think of it as mentoring, and the way we approach it with the Gratitude Network is we're training mentors, essentially. What does a mentor do? Depends on what your skill set is. If you're great at fundraising, then you'll probably be helping in several ways there. If you're really good at strategy, or you're really good with marketing, or you're really good with business modeling, whatever it is, we figure it out and then match you with the organizations we're working with. So how many people in the audience have mentored someone in the past? So it's easy. We've all done it. And I think that is a good, my advice would be look for a younger person or any social impact startup, whether it's younger or older person, doesn't matter, but someone that will take to your mentorship and the kind of advice that you would best give.
Recommendations? Well, I think, as this isn't rocket science, but I think modeling is often good. And I think thinking about what are you really passionate about, as I mentioned, as a first step, truly. And then thinking about what type of work environment do you thrive in? Because going back to what I was mentioning at the beginning, the work can be done in so many different sectors. And frankly, some people really thrive being close to the impact in the work and some further away. And I'll just give the example. My sister is a principal in East Palo Alto, took over the school a few years ago. It's the largest elementary school in East Palo Alto, now the highest performing, the only school that's reached 800 in API, 100 points above the district average. So this incredible story, award-winning educator. I'm the black sheep in this family, but she really is like rock star, and she gets her energy from being with those kids and from being very close to the work. I can guarantee you'd be fired in that job. I mean, just the struggle of working with
the
the
microphone.
parents, with the microphone, exactly, with the technology, with the the struggle of working with the district office, with working with, just even with the kids. I don't have the patience for it. And frankly, people dream about this sort of life in philanthropy, but she would not, we know, we talk about it often, she would not like to spend her days in an office, never on the ground, reviewing RFPs, and not
Request
connecting.
for proposals.
Working in a corporate environment. Even the people, and I love my colleagues, but I can just tell you she wouldn't, that's not who she would want to work with. Even with the broad impact that she can recognize you can have by empowering thousands of nonprofits. It just wouldn't be where she would thrive. And so I think really being true to the type of work environment you want, because the impact can be held in so many different ways. One other example here, I was with our accessibility group, and here are engineers working at a huge company, but their passion is around accessibility. And it was a live demo of a young girl from China doing, we have a Kinect, which is connected to our Xbox, which is the camera, so you don't need controls anymore. You can kind of move around, and it recognizes what you're doing and puts it through an avatar or whatever on the screen. And so here was this girl signing, sign language, and it is immediately translating it and giving her a voice, right? Like, and this is these engineers' passion to bridge the accessibility challenges through technology, right? The sector, think about the work, the impact that you want to have, and the type of work environment that you want, and then your skill sets as well, and kind of what you bring in background or interest, and you'll see it evolve. But I think you have to be, it's not just you want to have a social impact, so it's obvious where you should work or what that is, because there are different, there's the innovation and there's the ingenuity in across all of the sectors.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Great.
I think we'll come work. Want to come work here with Sid and Thea and Microsoft. I want to go over for Sid. I'd say a couple of things. One is my work? Okay. I think Woody Allen said 90% of life is just showing up, and I think that's very true in this topic, right? Is that and it kind of gets to demystifying that Nancy talked about, is that these groups would love to have you involved, whatever level, and just kind of showing up, expressing interest, is a lot of the ball game, and you will be put to work, and you will be welcomed. Second, I'd say, kind of find a role model or be a role model, right? So one thing that we're very lucky, and speaks to the shift that Jen talked about earlier, is, sort of the thing that we dreamed about in the Full Circle Fund, that you'd have folks in the Valley like Mark Benioff or Tim Cook or Reed Hastings or other people who are great corporate leaders, but who are deep into social impact and are doing it in their companies, and are real leaders. And so you can be a role model in your own company. At my company, Lex Machina, we've taken the Founders Pledge, so we've committed some equity, but also really getting the company involved in volunteering and engagement. So I'd say, and then lastly, what was spoken about, either find your passion. I think Sid just did incredible job of sort of speaking about that, or find a platform like SV2 or Full Circle. You can get a broad exposure, and then either stay at a broad level, or maybe you find that one organization you really want to just dive deep into. So I think there are a lot of resources, and it's just about really taking that next step.
So we're going to go to audience questions shortly. I understand that there will be some roaming mics, but before that, we are going to do a quick lightning round. And what this is just going to be rapid response. Just whatever comes to mind, put it on out there.
42, sorry.
42. So to warm up, if you were a mode of transportation, what would you be?
Bus.
Bus. Mountain bike.
Electric vehicle.
Slow boat to China.
With wine.
Hybrid vehicle.
Hybrid. Yep. Great. So what's one book that you'd recommend?
I go Mountains Upon Mountains. It's easy.
Great one. Banker to the Poor, Muhammad Yunus. His biography, absolutely stunning. And there is a new one I'm just partly through, so I can't tell you how it ends, called The Purpose Economy by Aaron Hearst, who founded Taproot Foundation. And it really is talking how we've gone from an agrarian economy to an industrial economy to an information economy, and we are now going to a purpose economy in which we are trying to link together the sense of purpose as well as our working. And so far, I'm not all the way through it, but I'm highly recommending it.
I have to add that one to my list.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just had him come in and talk to the team, and it really is.
Was it good?
Yeah, it's really good work.
Right.
Power Broker, it's an old, I think it's good thinking about impact on a grand scale.
A Path
got one
Appears,
more.
Nicholas Kristof,
Halftime.
and
Halftime by Bob Buford.
Which one?
You guys heard of Halftime by Bob Buford?
Yeah.
I'll have to look
Really
that
good.
one up. And for the parents, we talked a lot about the influence of parents in lives. I would say The Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein, and I read regularly.
Oh, beautiful.
All right, next question. What is one of your favorite community service activities here in Silicon Valley?
Okay, I got it.
Or abroad.
This one, and SB2 is doing it coming out. It's called a poverty simulation, and it's run by Step Up Silicon Valley. And if any of you have a corporation who do it, this is where for an afternoon you are role playing a person in a very low economic situation, and you have to manage your way through the complexity of their lives with incredibly limited resources and all sorts of obstacles. And it will one afternoon, and if you have children, take them. Open your eyes to what stress it is to try and survive when your resources are so constrained. It changes your life.
Cultivating empathy. And actually, SV2 is hosting that. Any of you are welcome to come speak with Nancy, me, or Lisa Van Duzen. It's on May 17th. Community service. Any favorites?
Well, the example I'm going to give I haven't done yet, but I serve on the board of the Nature Conservancy California Council here in California, and I got an email recently that said, do you want to be a baby sea turtle hero? To which I just responded, yes, I do want to be a baby sea turtle. And it's a trip to the Solomon Islands to work on the conservation work they're doing there as the baby sea turtles are hatched, and frankly, there's a lot of poaching of the sea turtles during that time because they know they're on land, and it's a major issue. And so I'll be going. I haven't done it yet, but I'll be going.
Protecting the baby
so
sea
that's what I'm
turtles.
most protecting the baby sea turtles. That's fine.
Excellent. Oh, so I'm excited for the poverty simulation. I really want to try to go to that. I'll go there. I'm focused on stuff we can do with kids. So the old beach cleanup. So just kind of getting out there, being part of nature, cleaning up. It's great.
Mm-hmm. And I just add my new red shoes up in Redwood City.
Yeah,
We have
my
groups there
family's done
go,
that,
and
yeah.
I have a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old, and they are writing about this in school, just how they've learned that not every child has a new pair of shoes to wear the first day of school, and just making sense of that. Okay, last question before we go to your questions. What's one of your current go-to resources, not books, anything else, for keeping abreast of social impact issues?
Stanford Social Innovation Review, SSIR.
Good one.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a subscription, and they probably could use the money, although it is Stanford. But if not, they have blog posts. If you don't want to pay, they have everything that's current, incredible research, incredible models, great commentary. SSIR, really remarkable.
No, I agree.
Webinars,
Webinars.
blogs.
That's a good one.
I think the other thing that's interesting to think about now is for each of you, sort of as you decide, I know this isn't the quick answer, but is thinking about the fact that so much information sharing is happening through social media, and who are those points of light for you, depending on your subject area or your issue, right? So, for me, it is not a single source anymore. While there used to be sort of one place in different points in my life I knew I could go to get information. It's thinking about who's doing blogs that are really making a difference, or who's thinking thoughts or sharing readings that I really want to be engaged with, and making sure I'm part of those networks. There isn't a single source. It really has evolved to being sort of thinking about an ecosystem of learning that you can have, and often enabled through social media.
So I love that. My answer was SSIR, but it's been mentioned. But the content curation, so a tool I use called Paper.li, paper.li, and you can pick your top 20 to 25 sources. They can be blogs, they can be Twitter feeds, and it just curates each day, slurps from all these different sources, comes into your email box, and it's just, it comes to you versus having to spend all the time to follow your source. And you kind of fine tune it. I've got social ventures, impact investing, the Silicon Valley Business Journal, and it just helps you keep track. So I highly recommend tools to help you as well.
I found a listing, it's innovatesocial.com, that has 40 top social impact blogs, and I went through each one going, wow, 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 wow. So it's a long URL, sorry, but it's hard to find once you go to their website. It's hidden on their website, but it's innovate with an 8, innovatesocial.com. Top 40 social impact blogs.
Last word before the audience?
Yeah, and I'd say, just like an entrepreneur, I don't read TechCrunch. As a social entrepreneur, I do. I mean, there's stuff I read, and you mentioned some great things. So I'll just say, that I think a lot of the great innovations have not been figured out yet, right? So just, empower yourself to create the next great innovation.
And I bet you all have suggestions too. So I encourage you, if you do get a hold of the mic and you want to add to this popcorn round on any of those topics, feel free to do so. So. It's open now for questions. Just raise your hand, and I think we've got 2 mics.
Thank you very much for the presentation. My question is that when I think of an innovative nonprofit that has a lot of social impact, I think of Khan Academy. And when you hear what Sal Khan talks about his decision making it a nonprofit versus a profit organization, it's very inspiring because I think the Khan Academy is today what it is because it is nonprofit and it has such a global reach. What are you doing, or what do you think everybody in the audience can do to encourage entrepreneurs when they come with new technologies to make it more, or consider a nonprofit versus for-profit, and hoping either Google or Apple would buy their company? Because I think there is a different path that people can take to make the innovation of these technologies more successful and spread through the globe. Thank you.
Would anyone like to take a stab at it? Thank you for the question.
I mean, I think there's always the balance between sustainability. You want a social entrepreneur to find a path to sustainability. And so if there is, as in Saul's case, sufficient funding, if you have the Gates Foundation and you have that, where you can do that, it's fantastic. Not every social innovation is going to find that kind of capital available. So sustainability is just a day 24/7 thing that most social entrepreneurs have to deal with. So there are different models. I mentioned one that's a hybrid. There are different models evolving to say, can I be a for-profit and a nonprofit? Can I scale? So I think each entrepreneur has to decide where is there a source of revenue in an education, perhaps, where there is a fee-for-service that's available, but they might need to augment it. But they need to be so concerned about sustainability to ever get to scaling the kind of impact they want. So each model will be different, but it's a consideration that I think a lot of them make. Maybe they start for profit and later they can do a foundation or an organization, or they can do a TOMS type model where they're giving away some of it at a time. But if they can't get to sustainability, it will die.
I'd also just say that, I think that's, the model you mentioned is inspiring for another reason, right? Because he started doing those lessons really for his niece and nephew, and the quality ultimately propelled it. But I think it's, it's just another inspiration, I think, to all of us, right? Do something, fill a need that you see, and likely, if something's important to you or your family, it's likely to be important to others as well.
Next question.
Hi, Lisa Nash, Blue Planet Network. I have a question for everybody. For Jen and Josh and Nancy, what is most successful in getting individuals engaged in social philanthropy? You all are involved in efforts. And for Sid and Randy, how do you really filter through all the entrepreneurs who are probably at your door every day? wanting to talk to you to find what's really most engaging and can make the most difference.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. So which question would you like to start with?
Well, I'd say fundamentally, I think for our models, it's really about building community around giving. I mean, I think that fundamentally that's what, I think you engage people, you get them involved in community, they come in through their friends or get their friends involved, and, I think that's what helps propel the engagement, as opposed to all the other demands sort of on their day, is because they get, engaged in a community. I think that's fundamental.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what we see at SV2, which was surprising to me, but that there's sometimes a confidence gap in our communities made up of very successful individuals, faculty members, lead parents, different career paths. But sometimes when it comes to giving money away, we've all heard it from Warren Buffett, it's easier to make than to give away effectively. And so there's some sort of barrier. And so providing a safe space to ask questions, to dabble in giving, maybe with a group, can unlock some of that confidence that then builds on the steps. But anything else that you would add, Nancy, to that, or we'll turn to
Yeah, I just think
Randy.
because there's so many demands on people's time, they're so busy. It has to be fun. They have to want to be there. So it has to be an engaging community. It's doing something that they feel is significant and satisfying, and they want to come back because they're getting something personally from it, as well as achieving whatever social causes they may take on. But there's just so much competition for people's time and attention.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the second question, which was about how do we identify the best entrepreneurs, I think given how many there are out there, tens of thousands, for the Gratitude Network, the way we do it is we engage the crowd in helping us. For example, we were talking about SOCAP earlier. SOCAP is allowing the Gratitude Network to do our award program with SOCAP each year. So last September when we had that, we basically had involved probably something like 15 or 20 judges in the process of going from 500 applications from around the world down to 4 winners. And so by using the power of the crowd, I think that helps. It's a little bit, I think that's actually going to expand in the future, by the way, where the power of the crowd will become an even greater mass audience. In a way, if you look at Kiva, for example, which has been a poster child for social impact, Kiva is a great example of finding the best entrepreneurs through the crowd. So that's one. The things I tend to look for are entrepreneurs who can really move the needle. So trying to use entrepreneurship as a lever, as a major lever, as opposed to other forms of philanthropy. For me personally, the entrepreneur has the ability to impact a great many people if you can pick the right one. So that's sort of the tricky part. Passion, which we talked about before, I think is critical, and kind of a team. Usually it's not just a single entrepreneur. It might be an entrepreneur that came up with the initial idea, but you really have got to look for a balanced team that is going to be able to scale the original concept. So I think those are a couple of the things.
And we used a couple different models. I'd say in general, the field of philanthropy and the field of corporate philanthropy in particular has, yes, thousands and thousands of requests that come in every month from every type of issue, right? And so you get very, very focused on what impact you're wanting to see. And then you're either running an RFP process where you're seeing what's out there and sort of setting up a plan to accomplish that goal, or you're setting up an ecosystem of people that you think can make that happen, right? And you're testing things to see whether that can happen. You also rely a lot on partners. And the last question took me back through a few years of history where we've been funding for years the education category of the Tech Awards through the Tech Museum, if you're not familiar with them. And the Khan Academy was a winner a few years back. And so talking to Sal even before that had really taken off, helping to connect for him an entire network of funders and the Gates Foundation and others that could take it national. But we knew early on that the partnership with the Tech Museum and the Tech Awards would help us find those entrepreneurs who were really doing that cutting edge work, and then we could connect with them and help them build a network of folks to make that work happen. So often it's done in partnerships, like we work with the Silicon Valley Community Foundation and others to make those things happen.
Next question.
My name is Tammy, and so a lot of this relates to me because I started in a nonprofit, and I come from first generation, so I didn't know anything growing up. All I knew was I needed to go to college. So right after I graduated from college, I said, okay, now what? I couldn't find a job. I ended up working at a restaurant for 8 months. But then somehow I found my way. I got a college degree and then became working full-time as an analyst for 5 years. And that was during time of recession, so I had to stay home and take care of my parents. And then eventually I wasn't happy with my career, so then I decided, I didn't like this, and then started a nonprofit. I'm struggling a bit because there's lack of technology on my side. And what is your advice on, having an idea and then having about probably plus 50 membership in my community, in my nonprofit, but yet there's no solution to scaling because I'm doing this all mostly manually. And it's basically, the idea is informational interviews for 30 minutes, like a dating website. So it's like Tinder, sort of like OkCupid, but you're kind of shopping for careers instead of relationships.
Well, Tammy, I know we've got some expertise. I'm sure you can connect with one of the panelists, and I'm happy to chat too afterwards if you can stay. Where something that you said struck me technology. It was hard for you to get technology. Where I went with that, and I think it's a point for the whole sector, is funders these days still do not fund technology oftentimes, or core organizational support, or leadership development for nonprofit leaders, or board development work, or business plans. So basically the core infrastructure and systems of a healthy organization. An angel investor would never earmark their money specifically for a program and starve the organization. Well, the funding system that we have now does do that in some ways. And so I would encourage you all, if you're thinking about how if you're a donor, can be most effective in your giving, to try not to earmark your money to a nonprofit and instead leave it up to the talented executive team or board to decide where it can create the biggest impact. It's letting go as a donor at the same time. Only 25% of dollars are unrestricted, and if you can provide multi-year support, even better. So one suggestion that might help with technology, and we're happy to follow up afterwards on your specific question. Yes.
Actually, I have a question for your audience. How many of you are nonprofits? Are nonprofits? Are you employed by a nonprofit, or do you run one? Okay, on behalf of all of these, you guys have immense resources, incredible connections. If you were talking to each one of these individuals, and I'm Gail Carpentier with TechSoup Global, and we have the privilege of working with some amazing companies. But for these people who don't have the access to the resources that we have and are fortunate enough to have developed, what would these people need to know to get your ear, to get your support, to get you to help them go the next step? How do they introduce themselves to you? What's been the most effective pitch you've ever heard, and how can they learn from that?
Great question. I'm happy to take a quick first stab, but I'm really curious to hear what you all have to think. I spent 6 years working as a program officer at the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. What really resonated with me was nonprofit leaders, and if nonprofit board members also have the same vision, what does success look like? How do you know if you get there? And what are the key steps along the way that would be suggestive that you're on that path? And that it sounds like a very simple framework, but oftentimes in our work in the nonprofit space, it's hard, it's challenging. So to really look for a team who's done that thinking, I think is really important. Also, humility and coachability. So not being comfortable saying, hey, I tried this, and here's what I learned from it. I think that's really powerful, and of course there are power dynamics between nonprofits and funders just by the power of the purse. But particularly here in Silicon Valley, talking about failures and what you've learned from them, for me personally, I think that's a real sign of confidence and a continuous learning mindset, a growth mindset that I think is really essential, a predictor of success.
Yeah, first of all, congrats on the work that you do. I mean, as you probably know, TechSoup Global was a Full Circle Fund grantee. I mean, you funded the computer recycling initiative that was very successful. Anthony Lee was one of our members who's, I think, still on the board, and a great guy. So I think, but I mean, I agree with a lot of things that Jen said. I mean, I think that you don't want to conflate things too much, but I think things as you look at as a venture capitalist, really there's a lot of analogies, right? I mean, you're looking for that passion and leadership. But it has to be combined with a plan that Jen talked about, a plan for success, right? How are you going to achieve, how are you going to achieve your goals? So I think that, while there's a lot of needs, there are a lot of funders, here, and sort of finding the folks that are going to resonate with you. I mean, just like when I'm raising money for my company, I get a lot of no's, but ultimately you find someone who, resonates with you, and you get yeses as well. And I think it's that's part of the hustle of any entrepreneur, or the social entrepreneur, or for-profit, or kind of finding the right people, getting in front of them. I think telling the story and finding someone who either resonates with your issue area, but hopefully really with your passion and with your plan to have an impact.
Anyone want to add anything that hasn't already been said?
Well, I'll just, I would be remiss if I didn't say thank you for the partnership with TechSoup. We do hundreds of millions of dollars of technology philanthropy with them every year. Echoing that, I think that, and saying it in a little bit of a different light, you as a philanthropist get, sometimes people see the connection as like, here are folks that have funds and we really need funds. And if they just hear what we're doing and the cause, they will be inspired and they will get it. But we're in a profession where we're getting very focused on the impact that we're trying to have. So you can't go to a barbecue without being cornered and, runs a seeing, the Seeing Eye Dog program, right? Like, we don't fund that, but you will get cornered for an hour on that. And so I think it's really doing that homework ahead of time. Most foundations have really specific focus areas and things they're trying to get done. And it's not just the access to those people. And when you do, like, if we could just get in to fill in the name of the company and meet that development team and they heard what we're doing, they'll get it. No, right? Like that won't. But I think the bigger picture and the difficult question to have is and it is that power dynamic, is the reality of like, what is the role of philanthropy and how is that evolving, both locally and internationally? Because the truth is, most foundations are not looking to fund organizations for a long period of time and definitely forever, right? They're looking at scaling certain programs, showing by example something that's working so that it becomes policy, right? They're not looking to become your long-term funder. And every organization says, we want to build a long-term relationship. This isn't just, we don't want a one-year grant. We want this to be multi-year, which is true. You want to see multi-year change and success. You're supposed to run that program. But I can tell you from the beginning, the funder is thinking, and then we need to have an exit plan, because we're not going to be with you forever, even if you're doing great things. And that reality is not talked about enough in the relationship and in the dialogue, so unrealistic expectations are being set up from the beginning. And I think that's it's a difficult conversation to have just because of the power dynamic. But it really leads to some fundamental breakdowns in understanding how the two sectors work together.
Nancy, or
I was going to say two other, the question in part pertained to how do you get our attention? Two ideas come to mind. One is the power of storytelling, which you both alluded to here just a moment ago. figuring out how to explain what you're doing in simple enough terms that your 6-year-old can understand it on one hand, but that you can pull at some heartstrings on the other hand, and all your passion comes out in that story. This is not easy, actually. So it takes some practice, rehearsing. It takes some thought about why am I actually doing this? How did I get here? Why am I really that passionate about the thing I'm working on? Or if you're helping somebody with their approach, the fundraising, it's helping them figure out why they're doing what they're doing. So that's one. Second is, I think it's the way you approach people, because even though we're all busy and we might be looking for something specific that we're funding, I think if we were all approached in a way of, gee, I'm looking for some more feedback. I realize this may not be a fit with exactly what you do, but I would like to get some feedback, and here's what I do. Would you be willing to give it? Now, you guys may say, no, we don't have the time for that. I would take that. Every week, someone comes along that is so infectious with their passion for what they're doing. Like today, I took a phone call from a 16-year-old who's starting an incubator, but he's like got the mind of a 30-year-old. How do I have time to talk to a 16-year-old? It was so amazing that what the 16-year-old was thinking about at his age. I had to take that call. And I had a half-hour call thinking, how can I help this young person? It wasn't really what I'm focused on, but I got it was fun just hearing what he was doing and figuring out where can I give back to him. So, and I think all of us are that kind of personality that it'd be hard for us to say no if you came at us for suggestions. Maybe.
So we are running short on time. I know we could go on, and we're happy to speak with folks afterwards. And I hope you can connect with each other, too. As I said, there's a lot of talent, a lot of experience in the room here. So I'm going to start closing us up with one final lightning round question.
Uh-oh.
Is there any one message in a bottle that you'd like to convey, just one piece of wisdom or advice to offer tonight?
Sure, I'll go.
Just do it.
Just do it. That'll fit in a bottle. I've got 10 words, too. I'll give you a little time here, but
I'll bring up something if I can. Okay. Are you going to go?
So I'll do 10 words. Giving to others is the caffeine of a joyous life. 10 words.
Oh, yeah, mine's not going to be 10, but right. Well, it's just because it hasn't come up yet. I think another part of what's important about, especially if you're thinking about changing into a different sector or thinking about social impact work in particular, is to think about how you don't get worn down by it, honestly. Because I remember being, when I was finishing graduate school, one of my professors gave the advice that he's like, if you're going into this work, it's tough, and you might be working on healthcare for kids for 15 years, and then at the end be like, nothing has changed. Like, what is keeping me motivated? And it's important to, there are all sorts of ways to do that. Your family, the issue, the scale, et cetera. There's ways to stay motivated, but go into it thinking about that, because that is real, and you need to stay energized throughout this work. It is wearing, and I think it's important to think about that at the beginning.
I will chime in with one of my favorite Bible verses: "To whom much is given, much is expected." And if you think about how we're living here in the Silicon Valley, I'm looking around the room, and I know many of you, and I'm just thinking, how lucky are we to be where we are today? And if you take the time to see how the other half of the world is living, it's not quite as luxuriously. So, to whom much is given, which is all of us, much is expected.
I can't say anything better than that, so I'm going to on the Randy's. That says it all.
You know who can say something just as good? Karen, would you like to come on up here? I think we're
Honestly, I think part of the inspiration that we can take is from conversations like this, and we really appreciate how candidly you share your points of view and how honest you are in general. Let's thank our speakers and Jen. That's what fortifies me. As a very small token of our appreciation, we have for you the Churchill Club speaker t-shirt.
Right.
We hope you wear that in very good health. The recording of this program will be available on the Churchill Club YouTube channel shortly, hopefully within the next couple of days, tomorrow maybe. And that is youtube.com/Churchill Club. You will find our recordings of our other programs there and as well, and we hope that you will find that to be a very helpful resource. And you have been a wonderful audience. Thank you so much. See you next time. Good night.